Okay, so in this video, we're going to continue on with styling our custom web part to look like an out-of-the-box web part. And as you can see here on the screen, custom QL, that's our custom quick links. The OOB QL, that's the out-of-the-box quick links web part. And you can see that the spacing is together, the sizing is together. In those scenarios where there's more section real estate for our web part to take it up and really maximize the space and the real estate within the container or section, it takes advantage of that. Oh yeah, another thing that we will cover, notice here in the out-of-the-box web part where you have a very long title and then you have the ellipse on the second line. We are able to replicate that in our custom web part instance here where you have a very long title with the ellipse on the second line. We're getting very close. Custom web part, styled, looking like an out-of-the-box web part. Let's get started. Okay, so let's get back to our video with styling our custom web part to look exactly or very close to the out-of-the-box web part. So just a very quick recap, what we have, this out-of-the-box QL, this is the out-of-the-box quick links web part, and then the web part that's titled parent component, that's going to be our custom web part. And we are on the journey of trying to style this to look like this. Right, and we talked about, the icon, the text, and then wrapping, then handling very large titles, containing them or taming them to stay within the box. But now we're on to the part of the page or the process to get our web part to work elegantly within the different section sizes. So if I go into preview and you look at the section and compare our out-of-the-box web part, our custom web part with the out-of-the-box web part, you will notice that the out-of-the-box web part extends out and it fills that web part zone, whereas we are taking some hard-coded widths and we need to be dynamic in that way. So, and then once we kind of do that, the other thing we need to do once we kind of get that wired up, there's also some things that we probably want to take a look at, especially when you look at our web part in a wide zone, right? You would notice that the out-of-the-box web part extends out. So if I preview this, it extends out further than the custom one. So you can see how this one extends all the way out, and then our margins are a little bit off, a little bit misaligned. We're close, but we're not operating like the out-of-the-box. So we got different tweaks and techniques to take care of that. So let's go ahead and start with our section. So section size support. So in order to do that, I have in my cheat sheet, and again, the link to this notepad is going to be in the description field. And if you look at the cheat sheet, the area to where we talk about the support for section sizes, here I have a code snippet. This needs to be in our web part code. And basically, we just want to pass this to our component interface just like this. So there's going to be a reference. So let's just copy this, go into our code where we have the web part code here. And then if you look at the interface, remember this is where we're passing the variant. We just want to add a line here. And basically, the DOM element, binding client rectangle method, and then we just grab off the width. Basically, this whole line here, and this returns a number type. This whole line here really just highlights the different widths for the various sections. So for the web part size, what we have to do is go to the interface and then make sure that we have a property that will be able to take on that web part size. And again, that's going to return a number. So let's just go ahead and add that property with a number type and save it. So now what we want to do, this is going to pass that in. And what we can do, we can now read this out. So if we go into our main component within our project. Again, we distinguish between our main component versus the functional component. Our main component is going to be a class component, and that's going to handle all of these, methods that we have as far as like did the component mount and all those other ones. But here we just want to pass that in, save it. Let's just call it section size. And this is going to, again, a number type. And then let's just bring that in via props. So this dot props dot web part section size, set it there. And now what we can do, let's just read it out. So that way we kind of know what we have. So let's just put it next to the component title, and we'll just read out the section size as this returned for us. Okay. So let me just make sure we have everything saved, save all, and then we come to the web part. And basically what it's going to do, it should just read kind of like a, I don't know what you call it, I guess like the width in pixels, so to speak. So let's just do, it's interesting how this is not reading out. Okay, here we go. Actually, let me move this. All right, now I was going to try to move it up. So here you're going to tell that the width of the section is 727. If I look at this in preview, I think I have to do a refresh because I don't think I'm getting the actual width. Let's just change it. I don't think it's changing the width every time the width changes. See how it's stuck on that 727? But if I touch it, reposition, then it give me 347 there. And I expect these to be the same 347 because that's the 50-50. And now if I go into the 1/3, if I move it here, it gives me a 280. If I move it to the 2/3, 415, right? So now I can dynamically pick up this width and determine how wide of a space, or more importantly, based on the width of the space or the section that I'm in, I can now dynamically adjust the max width or maybe the percentage of width for each item within the flex box. So that way I'm able to dynamically apply logic based on the available section. Okay. So if you look at the cheat sheet, here we pass that number into the interface. And now what we want to do, we want to take those numbers, and you can see this here, right? We want a reusable function that's taking that width that we see, and I've already went through it and named these thresholds. So if the width is less than 300, that means I'm in a section that's small. A small section, when you're looking at, I'm referring to, you see how you got the 3 right there? That's what we're calling the small. So even on the 1/3, the third portion of that, that's what we're calling the enum value as small. And then the other one, I have an enum that, again, all these enums I'm making up, right? I'm defining them here. If it's not a small and it's the next step up, which means that you're less than 400, we're doing the medium 50 and the medium 2/3. Then we have the large, and then we have what we call the jumbo. And the jumbo you can't see here in the workbench, but if I go to any standard modern page, and then if I click edit here, I don't know why this is taking forever. Okay, fine. If I go here and then hit this plus sign, hold on, let me get a little bit more real estate here. This thing came in a little wonky. Ugh. So if I hit this plus sign here to create a new section, the jumbo is going to be this full width section here. This is the one that kind of gives you that edge to edge experience. And right now I can't see it because I'm using a vertical section, and you can't use these two in conjunction, or it tries to stop you. There's a certain combination where you can squeeze them both in, but ideally you want to use one or the other. I already have a vertical section in play. That's why I can't touch this, but that would be our jumbo in our scenario. So for all these section widths, we have all these accounted for with those 4 different sizes. Okay, so let's do this. Let's go ahead and establish our enum, right? So this is just going to make sure that once we define the width and determine the enum based on that width, everything downstream or anything later in the stack we'll all be speaking the same language, so to speak. So, and that's why I love enums in that way, because we can kind of make those up. So let me just copy this, and actually I should have copied that second. Let me just copy this props file and use that as a starting point. So if I go here, copy, and then paste that in, let's just rename this. And then the enum is just, the end of the file name is just going to be enum. And the name, not all caps, and the name of the file is going to be the name of the enum series. So in our case, it's going to be section sizes. Right? Now, with my section sizes enum file, I can blank this out because that all came with the copy. And then I just want to define this, right? And again, this is just the same way you do interfaces. Instead of export interfaces, this is going to be export enum, and we're going to save those all. And I think the naming convention is that these are all lowercase. And you can confirm this with other enums that come with other modules, like the Office UI Fabric module or wherever the case may be. But I want to say that the naming convention is they're all lowercase, or camel case in that sense. All right. So now, as far as our utils, this is our reusable function. Ideally, you only want to call this once, because once you establish the section for, once you figure out the section size that your web part is playing within, you just want to save that and then just pass that along to the subcomponents that require that. So here we're going to go into our utils. This is where we're keeping all of our reusable functions. And here is looking for that section enum, and hopefully Quick Fix can help me out here. And yes, it found it. It found our custom guide, and it's just going to bring that in as a reference. And that's going to be fantastic. All right, so now we have our reusable method in utils that really just takes in that number as a parameter. We're going to pass that in from our class component. And then it's going to do this logic. And then here's another good thing. If we come and realize that these thresholds are off, we can adjust them in one spot and don't have to retrofit anything else, right? So if the medium has a different width definition or a threshold, we can medium 50, we can come in here and adjust that. Maybe it's a 410 or a 415 or something like that type of fine tune. We can adjust it here and then everything else. So it's a really, really good model, and it has a wonderful story as far as maintenance and scalability. All right, so now let's go to our class component, and we want to call that. And I think I got a nice reusable call here. So this is where I'll just define this into a local member within the class component. And now I want to pick up that change, right? So I'm going to do this load section within our component did mount event, right? So that's where we call all of our other events. So let's just go ahead and paste that there. I haven't defined this method yet, so let's get the definition of that. And this is really, really basic, just a two-liner, if that. And here's all my other business methods, so to speak. And this is just going to ride alongside that same pattern. Right. So here we got a local business method that says, oh, you want to get the section size. Not only does it call our reusable function within the utils, but it knows to save that into a state object within this component, and it's going to be within that state object that I pass it down. So the same way that the same pattern that we use for all of our getter methods to get data from our services. Instead of calling a service, this is just going to call a reusable function, update our state, and then everything downstream will be able to get the latest and greatest, because the state management is something that we get for free. All right, so this has a problem because I guess whatever my code snippet had is a different name than the local member name. So we just update that, and really that's it. So now we're ready to use this guy. So that's the biggest question. The biggest question is, how do you use it, and what are you going to use it for? So how do we use it? We want to pass this down into our child component, and let's say we want to do that by passing it as props, right? So if I look at this quick link, the first thing I want to do is call, and again, I'm making these up. We'll call this section size, and then we'll just pass this down, this dot state dot, just using the state. So if I go into my state object, I should have, I only have these two. I didn't define, I'm setting this, but I didn't initialize it. So this is one of the caveats of doing copy and paste, because it's easy to kind of miss the order. So let's just pretend, right, the section size, like if anything ever happens, I don't know what the default this is. So I'm gonna default this to 300. So if for whatever reason, if our function call fails, at least we would have a default value of 300. Well, if that thing fails, I think it probably won't even render. You have bigger problems on your hands. But let's just initialize it to 300, and then there's my section size there, and then I'm gonna just pass it in. And again, this is going to be, no, this is not right. I don't want this to be a number. I want this to be an enum, right? The section size, you want that to be an enum. So section size, oops. So let me just grab my enum value. Let's say section sizes, let's just say, let's default to small, or initialize to small. And this did not bring in our enum. Probably just got too much going on here. So let's just bring this in. And again, this is the pattern that I use to kind of discover what my abilities are. And that's going to be right there at the same level. Then I hit Control Spacebar. It shows me all my available options. We only had one, so I'm going to bring that in as such. And then just copy this. Oops. The copy was too strong. Section size enum. There we go. If I do the dot, that's going to be small, and that's going to be my default there. Okay. So now I have a default for section size. I'm going to pass this as a props value down to my component. And let me just save this. Actually, let me just save all here. Just make sure I don't have any red text within my bill indicating the error. Okay, so it seems like I have a clean bill of health. So now what I want to do is go into my quick links, my child component, and be able to use this. Now, the biggest spot where I want to use this is really going to be in my container, this width here, and it's 223 pixels, right? And basically, if you look at this, kind of get back, this is not really, this is hard coded to 223. So in all these scenarios, the widest I'm going to get in all of these scenarios is 223. And for the most part, it works when it starts to wrap. But it becomes very obvious that I'm not really taking up all the real estate. And that's the plan, right, is to take up all the available real estate that's provided to us by our section. And this 223 is holding strong. Right, so now I can take advantage of making that a little bit more dynamic, in that scenario. So what we need to do, we need to adjust this width based on our section size that's passed in. So what I'm gonna do, let's just do our width here. And then let's just set that to 223. as a default. And then we'll just go ahead and specify that within our CSS as a variable. Okay, so now what I can do, I can put logic in here that says if, and then I just check my props. And I hate calling props multiple times, so I like to kind of dump my props in a local variable. So let's just say section size. And again, this is going to be an enum, so I want to, so section, there you go, size enum, and let's just set that to props dot section sizes or section size. Here's the thing, I'm not using interface here, right? Because my interface is any, so it's not very clear on the type. So I'm gonna have to cheat here, go to this guy here as far as section size, the name that I'm expecting, and then come back and set it here. Okay, and this is another reason why I kind of dump these into a local variable, because those attribute names could change, and instead of trying to find and replace all those changes within this child component, I can just grab it here, only reference the local variable within the child component, and any changes are contained right here at the top. Again, just really trying to increase my maintenance story. All right, so now if this should be primed now as an enum, and I can set this against or compare this against other enums. Right, so if it's small, I think that's the right width. Right, we can have it set to 223, but if it's a medium, let's say a 50-50, that's a medium 50, then we probably want to set the width, and we can guess at this, right? This is the number that you're going to have to play with, 300, right? And I'm using the same like naming convention that I have for my width here, right? So if it's a number, I'm going to just state the number. But if I needed it to be a pixel, then I'm going to wrap that in quotes. But it seems like as if we're going to have to stick with the unit of measure. So if we're going to do pixel, then we're just going to do numbers all the way throughout. If we're going to do percentages, then we need to initialize this to a string, maybe like a 30% width, and then just stick with percentages all the way throughout. I don't think it's a good idea to mix and match. I'm not sure if it will allow you to mix and match, especially if I start leveraging TypeScript to make this type safe, because now you have to flip-flop between a number and the string. So here I'm gonna just stick with images. So I'm sorry, integers or numbers, the number type. So here I'm gonna just go ahead and put a curly brace, because based on my section size, if I have other CSS attributes to change, I want to stick them all in the block. So anything that I need to do for a medium 50, I'm going to stick in that block. Anything I need to do for a medium 2/3 is going to be in this block. And then anything I need to do for a large, and I'm not going to worry about the jumbo for this video, but you see the pattern and you can adjust those as needed. And what I can do an else if, just to be a little bit more efficient, because with the else if, it's only going to check the matching scenario once. But if I have a series of ifs, it's going to check each if statement, even though that's redundant and it really doesn't need to, right? Because you're only going to match one of these. So I'm going to do else if series to make this happen. All right, let's just guess at these. I know that these widths are going to be a lot larger. And I'm starting off with pixel just for demonstration purposes, but I've seen this work best if you do percentages, because there's scenarios where you want this each one of those blocks to be a certain width, and hard coding these to pixels only captures some of those scenarios. All right, so now that we have this, we have our section sizes, we have our enums passed, and look like we got lucky with the lights. So this is a 347, and if I look at my cheat sheet here, 347 is going to fall within the medium 50-50 range, right? And that's going to be the width there. So now if I adjust this to a full block, my individual sections will actually shrink. No, I think I went backwards on that, didn't I? For my large block, I actually wanted them to be a 223. Right, because I want to get 3 in the row before it starts to wrap. So let's just do this. There we go. And if I look at this in preview, there's my 3 in the row. And now if I do my 50-50, oops. Well, this is good because now I can kind of play around with these all together. Just my 50-50 fills it up, and you can see that my 50-50 is a lot wider than the individual items when the container is wide and we're trying to fit 3 on a row. All right. So this is actually looking pretty good. Okay, so now what we want to do, we want to dial this in, because if you keep playing around with this, you would notice that our widths kind of get wonky. But before we dial in our widths, what we want to do is to see if we can solve the margin problem. And I solved the margin problem just by looking at let's do this. I want to put this very close to one of the out of the box instances. So let's just slide this one here. Okay. So now if you look at this, you can know, because what we're trying to do, we're trying to match the space here. And this is important, all right, because this is our out of the box and this is our custom. And you want to match the spacing and the margins and things that you have here, because when they start to compose their page and start mixing and matching the out of the box web part with your custom web part, there's a certain balance of the page that happens. And that balancing of the page assumes that the margin and the spacing, the heights and things like that all kind of fall within the same pattern, so to speak, for lack of a better term. And what do I mean by that? So if I'm designing a modern page, I may go with this 2/3, right, layout. And I may have like one of my custom web parts here, and then I have another set of web parts here. And you will notice that this balance, they should balance, like how they start and stop, like the heights and all this other stuff. It should just match, because even though these are not in the same zone, but because they're, related or next to each other, these heights really start to come into play. Like these titles should be lined up at the top, the gap between the title and where your web part starts, all that needs to be touched, right? So let's start there. Let's start with the side by side. Let's try to get the titles together, the margins between the individual flex items that are within the containers. Let's try to get that spacing right, and then we'll take a look at handling that trailing margin. Okay, so first things first, if we look at that header that's being taken here, what we did, we took the H3 tag, and that's probably better. We probably want more control over that web part header. So let's just take all of this information out of that H3, dump it into a standard div. Let's kill the H3, and now let's define a style for the header. So let's just call it header and merge styles, empty object. All right, and let's just prime this, get this ready to style. All right, so I'm gonna guess, let's just say font size 20, and then I'm gonna guess the margin bottom is, let's just say 16, and that's 16 pixels, right? And now what we want to do is just go ahead and apply that class name to our header div. And this is going to be our web part header, right? So if we save that, come over here, hit refresh. Okay, So the one thing to keep in mind is that we don't want to style this in edit mode. We want to style this in live mode because they have out of the box when they have that add link. Looks like we nailed it on as far as the spacing because these now seem to start right around the same, but our weight is off, right? So now let's just bring up inspect, dial in our weight, and then we'll copy that over. All right, so let's just check our font weight here. And let's just say a 500. And let's move this so we can compare it. Yeah, I think the 500 is going to be close. Our margin is probably off a tad. Maybe if I increase that to 18 maybe. Yeah, so if I use this like a ruler, you know, again, this is just me being you know, over the top with it a little bit, but you know, that's the thing, like the whole purpose of this video is to get our custom web parts to look like the out of the box. All right, so our font weight is 50, and let's fine tune our margin to 18, right? So then we do a font weight is 500. And then 18. So that's going to take care of that. So the other thing we want to fine tune is our height. So we want to get this height together within this and where we are. Is it 165 or 168 or 171? Okay, 171. Our height right here is 38. So let's just adjust that to, I think, 35. And we should be hitting on all cylinders with a 35, right? Yep, and that's going to get us closest to a balance, right? So that's on my item, right? The item for the container height instead of 38 is 35, and save that off. Okay, so this is very close. I'm pretty content with that. Now let's look at our single column. And let's test our wrapping. So if I throw this web part up here in this single column here, I get 3 across. If I throw the custom web part into the single column right underneath it, I'm not getting the 3 across until I hit preview, which is fine. I'm not too concerned with that yet. But this is the issue that we ran into in the previous video. So if I hit this 171, right, the class name 171, and if I start to either increase the margin, so top right, so this 11 here, you notice that I can't get enough margin in there before it starts to wrap, right? And that was the caveat. That was the biggest gotcha. Now, looking at this, our strategy actually needs to be a lot different than what we're using now. We should not be using margin in this way on individual items, because what's happening, if I mouse over here, you see the orange. If I have an item, a Flexbox item on the end, well, the margin that I'm having here to separate these two, number 2 and 3, will be the same margin that's over here on the far end, on the trailing margin for that row. So what's happening is that the container is running out of space. They say I can't allow a width of an item plus a margin and still keep it all in the same row, because you're pushing up against your parent container for that. So a better way to do this, and this is where Flexbox really shines, is that you really want to take your margin out of, especially your right margin, take your left and right margins out of the individual items, right? So I'm gonna make those into 0. And then what I'm gonna do is go to the container. 162 is the container for all my children, right? And then in my container, this is where I define my flex, and I tell it to do a row and a wrap. But then I need to justify the content. And there's a special attribute called space between. Now, if I do the space between, look at that magic that happens. It takes all the available space that was on the end and evenly apply them in between the children. And as soon as I do that, just like magic, I'm right in alignment to where I need to be, right? So this is that's the fix for that. So now what we need to do is adjust our here's the item. So the individual item, the container for that, let's rip out the margin. So there should be no left and right margin for these individual items. So that's going to be 0. So we don't have a top margin. We don't have a right. We have 15 for the bottom, which is fine. And then we don't have a left. And this is exactly where we need to be. So let's just save that off. And now if we go to the parent component, within its style that is defining for the container, we want to use that justify content, and then we want to put in space. So if you put the double quotes and then your control space bar, space between, that's our attribute, and then hit save. All right. All right, so just like that, we should be good. If I hit preview, there is my 3. It's kind of weird. This thing is acting really weird right now. So even my out of the box is not showing 3. I don't know why. There we go. Just took a couple of refreshes. All right, so out of the box. So this is out of the box, and that's the spacing. This is custom, and that's the spacing. And to the naked eye, they're very, very close. Extremely close, right? Now, here's another thing to notice. When we have a very long title, when we get to the second line, we get that ... We're truncating our second line, right? So we're not going beyond that, but we're not getting the ellipse to let the user know that this is not the complete title, that we had to truncate that title. Now, in order to do this, actually, if you look at the way Microsoft is doing with the out of the box, you would notice some CSS here. They have a display called WebKit box, right? And notice that these have a special hyphen in front of it, which is weird. But I played around with this, and these are the 3 that you need in order for this ellipse to pop in, right? So if you start unchecking them and not applying them, you would notice that things started to fade and go away. What's needed is that I think this number here indicates how many lines before you try to truncate, which is interesting because I think your overflow and your height helps define that as well. But somehow I guess you need that. And then as far as orient, you have several options here. You have vertical and horizontal. So vertical meaning that, you know, we're expecting the text to wrap top to bottom, versus horizontal where we're expecting the text to wrap left to right. I can't really think of a good scenario where that would be the case. And then for the display, and again, I'm not a CSS wizard at all by a long shot, but this display, it seems like that's like sets the stage for other attributes, right? So we've seen display, if you specify flex, there are certain CSS capabilities or functions that you can use. If you set the display to grid, there's another set, right? And those attributes or functions within CSS only work if the display is set to that mode, so to speak. And that's something I learned just by shooting this video. I didn't really understand that at first. Like I was just blindly copy and pasting code snippets. But yeah, the display is almost like the mode that you're putting this little container or this class in, and whatever container or tag that's on is going to pick up that mode and understand that other, in this scenario, WebKit dash ... And in our scenario with Flexbox, when we say display flex, now we get like justify content, flex direction, and all of those other verbs related to the flex display mode, right? So just keep that in mind. I'm sure there's others out there, but when I saw this WebKit and then I saw other CSX examples that use display and setting that to grid and how they use other verbs within CSS related to the grid, that's when the light bulb went off, like, oh, that like sets some mode or something. So I know that's off topic a little bit, but it's very interesting. So this is what we need to do. We need to apply this. Now, this is where we're going to run into a little situation here. because what we need to do, we need to apply that that WebKit, and we want to apply that WebKit to, if we go to the item, there's a the container, right? And we purposely wrap this div tag over the text, right, in order to tame that title, right? Because that's a very, very long title. So this is where we want to apply our WebKit. Now here's the situation. I can do a display here, and this is going to, again, set the mode. And I know to use double quotes, and it starts off with a hyphen and then web, and then I fall off a cliff, right? It doesn't understand WebKit. Even if I do it without the hyphen, still no love. It doesn't understand WebKit at all. So I can't, it seems like with this merge styles, there's no support for WebKit or whatever in that way. So now what I'm gonna have to do is fall back to my CSS, my global CSS library. So again, we use this as a placeholder because this thing kind of blows up if you don't have anything defined in this object here. We're not using this, right? Again, this is just a placeholder. So let's go ahead and throw this away, and let's call it, now what we have to do is come up with a generic name. So let's just call it the text wrapper or text truncator, or I don't know. Let's just call it the text wrapper, right? So the text wrapper is going to be the name of our class. And we want to have this generic, right? Because again, this is just a utility, and we want to define this thing to do one thing and one thing only. So with the text wrapper, we want it to, so define the display. And then here, let's do our fancy WebKit. What's it, box? WebKit box. And then for the WebKit, I forgot that quick. Let's find it. Let me refresh this because it looked like I was tinkering with it and it lost its true value. So what do we have to define again? All right, so display is WebKit box and then orient and then to. Right, so let's just copy that and then paste that in. This should be a semicolon. This is why it was crying. All right, so that's going to be our wrapper. I'm mixing up the syntax, right? And that's why, I don't need that colon and all the other weird stuff I was trying to force it to do. All right, so now this is defined in my global CSS or SAS, right? And I think I have a reference to that styles. I don't. So I have to bring in styles here, and then I need to merge it. Now, this is super cool. What we want to do, right, this is just standard CSS. Like, so if you use define a class name on a div tag, it would be like CSS, and then, of course, you can have multiple class names, right? So ideally, what we're trying to do is styles dot, and then you have to put like a space in them between it. This is what we're trying to do. We're trying to get one name, a space, and then another CSS name, and we're trying to use these together. So let me quick fix. There we go. All right, so under the styles object, I have the text wrapper, right? This will work, but we don't have to do this. We can get a little bit more elegant than this. But let's just save this. Make sure I do save all. I just want to confirm that this is working. We have the right CSS definition. So if I go here, preview, there we go. Ideally, this is a ho ... This is just a longer text. I just assume this is the entire text, which is why I'm not getting this. But the fact that I see this, I know that this is working as expected. All right, so now let's make this a little bit more elegant. Because we're using merge styles, this is exactly what this function does. It allows you to concatenate many styles together in a elegant way. So here, all I have to do is use styles, text wrapper, and then a comma. And then for the second parameter, I'm going to just define what I want that CSS to be. And then if I had another one, I would just do a comma, styles, and then another class name, right? If I had multiple. And then, of course, because it's cascading, the order does matter, because I may have something that's overriding here that that I want to override whatever's defined here in certain scenarios, and that's where I would define it. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. So this merge styles is really just a method, and you can pass it infinite number of arguments with different CSS class, and then behind the scenes it's going to do the right concatenating for you to make sure that those class names are separated by a space. All right, so, and this keeps our code clean, because anytime that we want to impact this text container, we just define it once within our markup, and any definition on what that means, we can define it here and keep this clean within, keep our markup clean, because there's only one CSS class that's needed. All right, so now let me save this, refresh, and make sure that this still comes over as expected. And then I think the last thing we're going to have to do is to really put our percentages in. Like, I don't know why we have this weird gap here. That's weird. We have to put our percentages in to represent our widths. Right now we're doing our widths with pixels, and that's not going to work in every scenario. So it's best to put in percentages so that way it can fill up based on the container space. All right, so there's an example of that text with the ellipse still working. So now let's go and scratch our width on our individual child items, excuse me, within the container. And instead of using pixels, let's use percentages. And this is going to break. This is going to be a breaking change, but we're going to put in what we need. So if I am medium 50, let's just look at these different scenarios, right? So if I am medium, actually, let me, if I'm a 50-50, let me copy this and then move you up here. When you create a section, they add those text web parts, which is interesting. And now let me get a copy of my custom web part, throw it in the same zone or section. Okay, so this is a 50-50. If I close that, I should be expanded all the way across. So really, I want 100% item width, maybe, if I'm a 50-50. So here, that's already 100%. But I'm gonna put, let's just be cheeky and do 99%, right? And then if I'm a 2/3, and again, if you're a 2/3, the 2/3 is the wider of the 1/3 right? So this one, again, out of the box, I just assume that's 100%. So if these are going to be the same, we can probably get rid of some of this logic, or we can leave it as a placeholder and, you know, and grow into it, because now we have these defined for each one of these steps, even though the value is the same. It's really each its own in that scenario. And then if I'm large, I know I want 3 across. That would be like a 33.333. That's if we didn't have a margin, right? So now let's just kind of do, let's just do it with 30%, right? All right, let's see what this looks like. And actually, I think what I want to do, I don't know, I'm not going to touch anything. Let's see what it looks like first, and then we can make our adjustments. All right, so now that's my out of the box. That's my custom. It looks like my custom came in better than the out of the box. Oh, we got tricked. We were tricked. So if it's a 2/3, we actually want this small enough to stack 2 on the same row, not the 100%. Okay, so we have to fix that. And then let's just look at preview again. Wow, we went too wide here. All right, so let's do this. Let's use our inspect to dial these in, so that way we can get the real number. Let me see if I can shrink this into one window without it. I don't want it to, you see how it collapsed in my width got wider. I don't want it to do that step yet, right? I want to style it in its natural state right here. So let's see if we can fit all this in here. So if I inspect this guy, again, this is my 2/3 step, and I'm in the wider of the two, and I'm doing, all right, so let's just immediately hack this down to a 50%, and then let's just use our arrow key. Whoa. I'm doing the wrong thing. That was all the way wrong. I'm trying to affect the width, and I'm up here messing around with the height attribute, and I don't think I was in the right container. I need to be in the 71. Yep, 71. There's my 99. So let's just hack this down to a 50% and keep arrowing down until, there we go. And look at that space between. The justified content space between. You see what happens there? It puts that space right there in the middle, and that's why you don't need a margin, right? So it looks like that 43, I mean, to the naked eye, we can definitely, you know, bring out the magnifying glass and the rules and all this other stuff, but 43% should be our 2/3, right? So 43 for that. Okay. What is the other answer? The other answer for this guy here, when you are one column instead of 30%, when you get smaller than that, and you can do decimals, right? So you can do a 28.5, or you can do a 2850. Really, you can do a dot whatever. I'm just getting very particular now, but I think that's close, right? So let's do a 2835 for our large. 2835. I feel like I'm playing bingo. 2835. B33. Okay. Sorry. Get choked up. Wow. Sorry about that. Okay. So that's going to be that. And now I don't think we have an example of a 50-50. So let's go down here. Let's make this our 50-50 sample. Okay. All right. And this is our custom. We'll put it alongside of the out of the box. And with 50-50, this is weird. Isn't that weird? Even the out of the box, let me do a refresh here. It's like the out of the box did not handle that gracefully for whatever reason. Okay, 50-50 is just 100%. And I think we're okay there. There may be some fine tuning there, but I think we're okay. The biggest one was this 2/3 one here. Okay, so we have our values. Let's just save it off. We do a confirm, and I think we're good. I don't think I have anything else to share. Nope, I don't think I had anything else. I think this is the last piece. All right, so let me do a preview. There we go. So we're stacking left, right. That's great. Out of the box for one column, we're fitting 3 on the row. That's great. We're matching out of the box there. And then for our 50-50, we extend all the way across 100%, and we're good there. So that's the trick. That's the trick. So just like that, I mean, that's how you get your custom web parts to be styled and look very close to an out-of-the-box web part, right? And this supports, not only does it support all of our section sizes, but also our section colors, right? So now we really put in our content managers in a very, very good position, because now they can style these, they can change their colors, they can move our web part around, very similar to out of the box, and we're operating and performing as out of the box, right? If it wasn't for this weird name and that long number beside it, and you're looking at this with the naked eye, this will look exactly like an out of the box quick link web part with the button style, right? And again, this thing is this out of the box web part is so flexible and has many different shapes and sizes. And the only one that we touch out of all these layouts was this particular one with the 2-line text title and the description turned off, right? Now, if we turn the description on, we have a much different scenario. Of course, we can follow this same capability as that, as far as because our links do have descriptions and we're not showing them, right? So we could put that in the hands of the content manager to flip this on and off. We can also allow them to turn the borders on or off, right? Similar to out of the box. So out of the box says no outline. That means just turn the borders off. And if there is an outline, you turn them on. Now, notice that when you say no outline, if you pay close attention, it's doing more than just removing the borders. It looks like it removes some of the padding as well, right? And we're primed to do that. So in order to do that, basically what you would do is pass those props in. And we probably want to get away from any, right? We probably want to put an interface on top of this, so that way we're type safe in that way. Like you can have the JSON, like you can type safe this without it being too tedious, meaning that tedious in the sense that your this link property here, the link property here has to be defined for every property that's being returned in the JSON. So what I would probably do is have link set to any, defined in the interface, but then define props on my interface that are enum friendly, right? And then another prop to handle some of those web part properties, right? When we start talking about turning these on and off or giving them the capability to turn on borders and all this other stuff. Now, if they turn off the border, if you go to that next step and say, okay, let's wire these up with web part properties to let them to make some of these configurable, which I recommend, right? If your requirement allows for that, it's one of those things that you can grow into. If you're following Agile, that may not be the MVP. So you may just say, all right, for this web part out the gate, release 1, it's going to have a border, it's going to support multiple lines, and we're not going to show the description. For release 2, we're going to layer in the description and then also the option to turn the borders off, but you can set the default value so that way that's not a breaking change for all the web part instances that are already out there. So you can play a lot. This supports all of those cycles. It supports that iterative development, that agile type development. Even if you go live and you've been live for several months and then come back and layer in those capabilities, all of this supports that. You just have to have the right strategy, right? But to my point is, when you get to turning the borders on or off and maybe the description or show and hide, this is all going to be that same example to support that, right? The same way that we put a variable in there for this CSS definition with the width, we can apply that same parameter for our variable for the border, right? So basically what I would do is, and you can placeholder, like this is coming, right? So let's do a placeholder. So I X this out, go up here where I define my CSS class variables, and then I would just call this the border and have it default to this, because it's only going to deal with numbers and strings, because we're dealing with that merge styles method. You seriously going to play with me right now? Okay. And now, where I removed it, I replace it here. That's going to be my border, right? And then, when I bring that web part property in as a parameter, I can toggle this on or off or whatever the case may be, right? Or just make it 0. If you make the 0 pixels, it won't take up any space. But we saw that out of the box, when they turned the border off, they also decrease some of that padding. And again, this is primed and ready to go. We know how to use variables within CSS definitions now, so all of this becomes very fundamental and very straightforward, right? If you have the right pattern. So now I can have all this logic within my CSS to give me the most flexibility. And I know my section size and width that I'm dealing with, and they're primed to support section colors. So I think we're ready to rock and roll there. Okay, that's it for this video. In the next video, what we're going to do, we're going to start to allow the end user to add a link to their web part, right? So again, our web parts are list driven, right? So we have a list that's behind the scenes that's powering these. That's why as soon as I dropped that web part in, it started to hydrate with links. I didn't have to manually add them as I have to do with the out of the box web part. But now I can go the next step further and allow the current user to customize those web parts. No, actually that's 2 steps further. The next step further is just going to allow the content manager to add these links, right? So if I go to add link, it gives me this experience here. I think we can do a little bit better instead of, because there's no guarantee that they're going to come to this layout here. So what we want them to do, we want them to click add link. There's a panel that pops up. They give us the link title, the link URL, and the link description. And we save that back to the SharePoint list, and we want to see that link show up instantly, hopefully, ideally, without a refresh. So show up instantly within this grid, and then they can change the order and stuff like that by specifying the sort order on these items. That's the next video, okay? So that's going to take our skill to another level because, like I say, 80% of the time, you're probably just calling the REST API and then reading that JSON and displaying it on the page. Now we want to take another level to where we're actually reading and writing, right? So that's going to be very interesting, all right? So that's it for this video. If there's any questions, I'll see you in the comment section. Until then, take care of yourself. See you in the next video.